on Mike's mailing list at salessensesolutions.com. Mike appreciates you listening and wishes you good luck on your next sales call.
Well, welcome. It's Mike Krause with the Sales Sense Reality Talk Show. Thanks for listening today. Really excited to have Versie Walker as our guest today. He's a Hudson Valley author, entrepreneur, and public speaker, originally from Chicago. Versie has more than 20 years' experience in sales. He has self-studied for several professional licenses, including his Series 7 as a financial advisor. During his corporate career, he worked for great names such as J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of New York, Prudential Life. His knowledge and experience when it comes to sales are unparalleled. He has decided for the first time to share with you all his ideas, techniques, philosophies, and life experiences in hopes of helping others discover the million-dollar mind. Versie has a child of teenage parent, was a child of teenage parents. His mother is still in her teens when his parents separated. Raised in a single-family household was difficult nonetheless. His mother taught him at an early age the importance of hard work, the value of family, honesty, and apart from growing up in a single household, his childhood was fairly normal. He has challenged all of us from trying to have the voice in female-dominant family, weight gain, and writing his first book, which we're going to talk about. He was constantly concerned with grammatical errors and spelling and wondered if his audience would appreciate the content. During the early years of his childhood, he was unaware of many of the perils that surrounded friends and neighbors. During these years, individuals believe very firmly and it takes a village to raise a child, and a child dared not to rise up against the village. In spite of his go-nowhere background, Versie found the strength in his family values to rise above. Versie saw the vision and stayed focused on the goal. Through reading books, he made a commitment to take his life in a new direction. Now he shares his story to touch and inspire so many others through churches, corporations, employment expos, and youth organizations. His message gives back in ways that help others achieve their dreams. So without further ado, Versie, how are you this afternoon?
You know what? I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here on Sales Sense Talk Radio Show. So thank you for having me.
Yes. Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy day. So you can tell us a little bit more about you and your background and how it kind of relates to sales and walk us through.
Excellent. Will do. As you mentioned, I grew up in Chicago. I lived on both the north and south sides of the city and was raised by a single parent who originally was a teenager when she gave birth to me. And during the time in which her and my dad separated and divorced, she was really still in her teens, trying to raise a young man again in the inner city streets of Chicago. As a student, I've always been basically a C student through life, so nothing fantastic there. But I've always had a desire to sell or offer something. As far back as I can remember, even in I think it was third grade. I was in third grade. There was a vending machine inside of the school whereby each week my mom would give me a quarter to buy and replenish supplies that I had, used, either pens, pencils, or loose leaf papers. But I found myself purchasing them more, Mike, on a regular basis because I was giving them away, 2 sheets here, a pencil there, a pen here. And I started deciding, well, you know what? My mom is spending this money and I'm not getting the benefit, so at least if I'm going to, give it away, let me sell it. I started selling paper for like maybe 5 sheets for 3 cents. And that was really the beginning of me being a salesperson. But I've always fought doing sales. I know my first job had the title sales in it, and that was working for a lumber company. But I really wasn't a salesperson. I would just take you down the aisle where the advertised sale items were, but never fully engaging or delving into the sales aspect. And when I went on from there to become a telemarketer is where I really found the most amount of difficulty. I was probably very impersonal, was too scripted, did not really believe or understand the product, and had a difficult time with it. So when it came to my career, I took other directions. I worked as a ticket agent for a company in Chicago called Chicago Transit Authority, so it's the rail system. And I worked there for a number of years. And every time I would bump into a friend of mine, I would always see how he prospered financially and materially. And he kept telling me, you know what, that's a big corporation. They're going to only pay you minimum scale. You need to leave that. You're better off with sales. And I fought that for so long till one day in 1993, I met with my partner, we were, again, from high school. I went out and did something foolish, Mike. I had just bought a motorcycle, took the course, but was still very inexperienced. And we went out and raced. And after being warned to only race in one direction because the opposite direction had a curve that was pretty hectic and too hard for most people to handle, we followed the initial direction, but we could not resist the desire to race back in the opposite direction. My friend, he was in a Lexus 400, so he was in a car and I'm in a motorcycle. We raced the opposite direction, and I wiped out at 98 miles an hour. I took the curve. But fortunately, I had my helmet on. I was in very bad shape, very bad condition. Both of my knees were split wide open. Helmet was cracked in 3 different places. But because of that injury, it prevented me from going back and working as a ticket agent and as a train conductor, and forced me to go into the life of sales. And that was actually the reason me and my friend was even meeting, because he wanted to tell me more about his industry, which was the debt collection industry. He worked for an organization which won contracts from the Department of Education to collect on defaulted student loans. And that's when the true introduction or the true desire to be a full-fledged salesperson came about. And even though you're collecting debts, you have to use words and phrases to have a person that is compelled enough to then write you a check for $17,000 on a debt that they hadn't paid in over 13 years. And that was, again, my true introduction to the sales professional and how you can not only assist people, but help them in making the right decisions.
Absolutely. It does take guiding your prospect to make the right decision. There's no question about it. Let's walk back to, you said something interesting about when you were in retail and you walked someone to the product and showed them, but then you didn't engage in the sales process. I find a lot of times working with salespeople that is the case too. They walk the person to the product and then they don't really engage the sales process. Can you talk a little bit about how you do engage a sales process, especially collecting debt?
Okay. Yeah, Mike, and I find this interesting, and just in every aspect of sales, retail or whether you're selling Boeing 747s to corporations. We will present the product in such a way, and we'll have all the basics and all the features, and we would actually have the person wanting to buy, and we won't even ask for the sale. We won't even ask them, so do you want to ring that up, or even give them the instructions and guide them on how they need to finish out the process to conclude it. And my first 10 years in sales, I did everything wrong. I did not, acknowledge the person well. I did not find out what aspects of any product that they were interested in or what their needs were. And I didn't even know how to create a need. And so when I would walk a person over the phone as a telemarketer, give them all the benefits of the product in which I was offering, I would let that lull moment, that moment of 30 seconds or even less that you allow them to ponder, I would let that be a minute. And then at that point they would say, oh, well, you know what, I don't think I'm interested. Maybe call back later. And that was a done deal. Nothing would ever materialize. But when you're talking about sales, whether it's over the phone, face-to-face, or even an advertisement, you want to make sure you give the person enough information. But when you're talking face-to-face over the phone, you want to find out what their needs are. And then whatever product or services that you're offering, make sure they have a benefit. Make sure that that feature that you're pushing or that you're selling, including yourself, has an added value and added benefit to the customer. I find that price really doesn't matter when a customer really wants an item or finds that or feels that there's a benefit to the item. I'll give you an example of how I transformed from my earlier years to now being an entrepreneur and a businessman. 6 years ago, I became self-employed. I left J.P. Morgan Chase as a financial advisor and opened up retail stores between Oregon State, Washington State, and New York State. I had 7 retail stores inside of malls offering cell phone products and services. And I had a vast amount of competition. but I was more engaging with the customer. When they walked up, it wasn't about the products I had on my shelf. It wasn't about the broken antenna or the battery replacement that they brought to me. It was about, how are you doing today? What brings you to the mall? Oh, I see that you have a Razor phone. How do you like it? Yeah, I find that they're phenomenal, and I'm talking to them, and I'm asking them various questions. I'm building that relationship so that my battery cell or my Bluetooth cell becomes 2 weeks later, hey, Mr. Walker, thank you. It's working. It becomes that relationship where I had people come back month after month or year after year, either just speak to me or buy additional products. I found when it comes to sales, and I know the biggest thing everyone has, again, I guess an attestment to, is the used car or automobile salesperson. But I had an automobile salesperson that gave me one of the most wonderful experiences. When we sat down, he asked me, in this car here, what is it that you would not like to have? Well, the car was fully loaded. Obviously, I would have loved everything. He said, but Mr. Walker, in your budget, what could you do without? And he went over, a list of things. He said, I remember you said you're from Chicago. He said, doesn't it get cold there? He said, you know what? This car has heated leather seats. It has a variety of products. I'm sorry, something just happened, Mike. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. He said this product has heated leather seats. It has automobile, auto start. He said, but let's do one thing. Before we go too much further, allow me to take this to your home. I said, why? He said, I want to make sure it fits in your garage. So he had took me from the top of the car, the functionality, the aspects, and the features, all the way to making sure that if he was going to get a sale today, he had to have not only buy-in from me, but from my spouse, but he had to make sure it fit in my garage. Because if it didn't, that could have been the one thing that blew the sale. But he was so cognizant, he was conscious of that, and most salespeople aren't. I had another experience, and I don't want to be too long-winded, but these were just two ideal experiences that helped to cultivate me as a better salesperson. Another car salesman did the same thing, and he kept talking about features, and every time he mentioned features, I thought about an expense. Then he said, but I know, again, you're from Chicago. Tell me the coldest day, the coldest, month of the year. And I said January, and I physically shivered when I told him that. He said, now, wouldn't it be nice, you have 3 kids, it's cold, you have to go to work, they're running late, you still need to shave. Wouldn't it be nice to put your hand out the window and push the button and your car it automatically starts for you and it's warming up? I'm like, yeah. He said, now wouldn't it be nice to just then be able to get in the car as opposed to going outside, stopping what you're doing, starting the car and sitting in the cold car for 15 minutes? I'm like, yes. He said, now isn't it worth $2,000? I'm like, yes. It probably wasn't, Mike, but he associated the feature with the benefit. And so now the cost didn't matter because it was beneficial to me and my family not to have to be inconvenienced, not to sit in a cold car, and other features that he sold in the same manner. And by the end of the day, I was saying yes, and when he even pretended I couldn't have those features, I got angry because those were my features. I wanted them, and I didn't mind paying the cost for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Features and benefits. A lot of times salespeople will focus on the features too much, but really the proof is in the benefits. What is this going to do for you? And how about going back to your car example, and we do talk about car people a lot because it's one of those bad experiences or good experiences that people have associated with sales. But he even went above and beyond to take it to your home and talk a little bit more about, actually if it was going to be a benefit to your garage. So, talk a little bit.
And that was, I'm sorry. Mike?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just saying, and that was one of the things in discovery and communicating with me. He knew I was a recent home buyer and that I always wanted my car in the garage, and he focused in on those things because he had tick marks in his brain and that he knew what would actually, again, lend this opportunity to not be just a prospect, but turn me into an actual client.
Absolutely. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your book. Tell me what was the motivation behind it, and tell the listeners a little bit more about the book and the value of purchasing it.
You know what? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. As I mentioned earlier, I became self-employed 6 years ago and started my retail business. And after doing so, I realized that I became a business owner manager, and I was tied to the business. Having locations between the East Coast and the West Coast, my day would start at 7 o'clock on the East Coast and would shut down to 12 p.m. on the West Coast because of the time difference. Then I realized that I wasn't fully engaging myself as I wanted to as a business owner entrepreneur. I noticed probably 6 months to a year prior to the downward turn in the economy in 2007, I saw that the mall traffic was decreasing, mall rents were increasing, gas prices were as high as $4, and I wasn't fully satisfied. Over 28 employees, I made over $500,000 each year in sales revenue, but I still wasn't at my optimal best. And I sat one day, it was 2008, I believe it was September 2008, and I was begrudging the holidays. I was begrudging having to overstock the stores and to have low sales because I don't have fully committed salespeople, and having to be at the store more often than not. So I prayed to God to deliver me and give me the inspiration to do something greater where I can be at home or abroad, but applying my knowledge in my profession and my services to help others. And I started writing. I had never written a love letter, Michael, and and I mean that with all honesty. I've never written a love letter. I began writing a better standard operating procedure and training manual because my employees were not getting it. I could be there, and they would be standing next to me, and a customer will walk up. They would either not approach them or approach them with a lackluster. And it was one experience that really catapulted me to go ahead and start writing a better standard operating procedure, is that one of the young ladies working with me wouldn't go approach the lady, and I asked her to, one of the customers. When she did, she came back and said, "Oh, she's just looking." No one looks at these products for almost 10 minutes and not want to buy. So before the lady left my store, I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you?" And we got to talking. 4 minutes later, it was an $84 sale that I would not have had I not been there and would have, forced the issue with my employee. So that's really what catapulted me to writing a better standard operating procedure manual and training manual, because I'd already had one in place, but I said something's missing. A month later, after writing just 17 pages, I was listening to a radio station of a gentleman I used to work with in Chicago. He's now a radio personality and has written 4 books. He had on a gentleman who wrote a manual on how to self-publish and create a book and a document that would last a lifetime to be able to share to the world. I then bought that book and I read it, and it became my Bible. Now, this was September 2008. In November 2008, I get a call from mall management saying that someone else wants to buy my location, and if I want to stay, I'd have to move my store, and the rent would increase. And I was kind of insulted because I've been with the mall for 5 years. I played the rent game with them over the last 4 years, and I felt it was unfair what they were trying to do to me and even this other gentleman coming in, knowing the economic situation we were in across America. I immediately told the rep, I said, "You know what, thanks but no thanks, but I'll be shutting down at the end of the season." She was surprised, and so was I. I called my business partner about 10 minutes later and told her, I said, "Honey," my business partner, by the way, is my wife. I said, "Honey, we're no longer in the mall." She said, "Excuse me?" I said, "December 31st, we'll be shutting down." She said, "What do you do after that?" I said, "I'll finish writing this book." At that moment, I had 50 pages, rough draft. December 31st, 2008, I shut down my store. January 1st, 2009, I opened up New Look Publishing and began to write my story. I wrote from my passion. I wrote from my heart. I wrote without the fluff. I made sure I covered overcoming adversity. I'm someone who used to be almost 300 pounds. I'm someone who was in a motorcycle accident. Darn near had to reprogram myself to learn how to walk and think again. I'm someone who was, again, a basic C student. I have my associate's degree. But in my lifetime, I've been able to open up over 5 different businesses, 3 in just the last 5 years. I have did sales on every level that you could think of. As you mentioned, I self-studied myself through 3 different professional careers, from debt collector to insurance agent to financial advisor, now author, publisher, and public speaker. I am the guy who's much like most of our listeners, most of our friends. I've procrastinated, I've had fears, I've had concerns, but what I've done, I dismissed all of those when I realized I was within inches of my life in 1993, and said tomorrow may not be promised to me. Inside of this book, I do talk about sales. The ironic part about the title is called Success, How I Ended Up Here. I have more people who are non-sales orientated individuals who will buy my book as opposed to salespeople. I even have people who have the audacity to say they don't need my book because they're already successful. I have never heard of anyone, I don't think Donald Trump would ever say he doesn't want to be richer or own more property. I don't think De Niro says that he doesn't want to get greater at what he does as a thespian. But this book not only talks about sales from the concept, the mindset, and behaviors, but I also talk about the discipline and the philosophy of successful people. So no matter what they do for a living or in life, they can be more successful. And I learned something in the last few years, that every time I read a book, I became 100% more knowledgeable. But after reading a book, I had a potential of $1 million earnings. So I had 1,100,000 reasons to read. And in this book, I talk about that. I talk about overcoming the adversity. I talk about how maybe the words inside of my book can maybe change your way of thinking if it's just 10% greater, 10% more efficient, 10% more professionalism. You can now go to the level of success that you may have once not had. It doesn't take a whole heck of a lot to drive or fly first class, but we're so used to living in coach. We're so used to just being mediocre and just, reaching a certain pinnacle and saying, this is the best, this is it. It's not true. And I proved that in my writing. I proved that in doing what I've done in just the last 6 years, venturing out without even a net, and just believed and had the faith that I can do better. So this book here, again, would be beneficial for anyone who is in sales, starting currently or an expert, but definitely for anyone who's looking to be successful and overcome adversity and overcome the fear. And again, fear is a paralyzing disease. It inhibits us, it prevents us from going, to the next level. And this book could help encourage you to take that leap of faith and go further.
Absolutely, and we all need that leap of faith, and we all need that person behind us to encourage us to, think big and get a little more motivated and inspire us to the next level. And I agree. You can never stop learning, and there's never enough, quote-unquote, success. It all depends on what you're seeking. Good. What are some success tips that you do talk about a little bit in your book?
You know what, from the sales standpoint, I discuss individuals that I've actually trained or worked with and their approach to, as an example, there was a banker I worked with. He was 19 years old, and he was already slated for this bank to become a branch manager. And when he introduced the debit card, because it was new to this branch, it was new to the system, he introduced the debit card to a customer. And everyone else, Mike, I saw introduce this product would always say, do you want a debit card? And he said, what is it? Oh, it's a piece of plastic. It's like a Visa. You can, pull money out of your account. The customer would automatically say, no, I have enough, credit cards. No, thank you. This gentleman, his approach was, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, you're going to receive a debit card. Do you want 1 or 2? And the customer would say, why do I need 2? Oh, 1 for you and 1 for your spouse. Oh, no, he doesn't even know I have this account. It'll just be 1 for me. They bought every time. It was his wording. It was his level of confidence. It was how he structured the sentence. It wasn't, do you want? It was like, you're receiving it. This is what you're getting as a valued customer. This is what you're getting as someone we place value in. and it was so, perfect. And so I talk about those issues there. I talk about people like Shaquille O'Neal, who, practice so many times free throws, over 500 free throws before a game and doing just normal practice. But he was still just a, 25% shooter from the field because he was practicing a flawed technique. So you can't just say practice makes perfect. You have to perfectly practice. So I discussed that in the book on how to find the perfect technique for yourself or that is working in your industry and marry it with your personality. I discussed closing techniques. It's only 5 steps to a close. It's your introduction. It's your presentation. It's to talking about the product. It's to, you're always closing, and it's to lead the person to the register or lead the person to action. And I discussed and cover those 5 steps within the book as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. The beginning of our conversation today, you stated that people don't ask for the sale, and 85% of people never ask for the order. And I find that to be the most eye-opening stat when all these stats that I look at is 85% of people never ask for the order. So it's not so much the product or the prospect, it's really the salesperson.
And Mike, this is true, and I think sometimes it's arrogance and other times it's ignorance. Sometimes they feel, I told the person what the product was, they're going to buy it, they're not going to buy it. And sometimes the person doesn't even realize, I set this thing up so well that, when you look at movie trailers, that is the best sales promotion I've ever seen. They beef up the music, they make it dramatized, and then they say in theaters next month. Now I'm sitting there like, I can't wait to get to the theater next month. I don't know what this movie is about, but they did everything to, whet my appetite and get me to that point. And it's so simple. And I learned from a young lady years ago who I saw go out on a lunch date with one of our coworkers, and she gave him a hug and kiss goodbye. And I said, you know what? You never gave me a hug and a kiss. And she said, you never asked. And I'm like, is that what I've been missing all these years? Is that what I've been missing? I just never asked. You never asked for the sale. You never asked for the promotion. You never asked for the opportunity. Wow.
It's that simple. And if the product is there and the prospect is there, it's really up to the salesperson to ask those questions and be confident in their approach and believe in their product. Obviously, if you don't believe in your product, that's going to be a whole other segment of uphill battle. So, and we have to close down a little bit here, Versie, but I do appreciate your time. Any closing thoughts, and also close out with how the listeners can reach out to you and, purchase the book or talk to you a little bit more or maybe book you as a speaker?
Yes, excellent. Thank you. My thought is that anything in life that is not going your way is in your way. Time is the one thing we have the most of, Michael, but it's the least thing that we should be wasting because you never know when your time is up. All great things start in the mind. So with the right mind consciousness and the right perspective, you can achieve and become anything you would like to do. I'm a living example of that. I did not write the script on my life, but I have found success in numerous avenues and numerous ways that I could not even imagine just 10 or 15 years ago. Believe in yourself and remain fearless. The title of my book is Success, How I Ended Up Here. You can purchase that directly through my website, and I'll personally autograph it for you. And for your listeners as well, I will also send you a 26-page, it's called the $1 Million Mind Business Plan. And it's for those individuals who want to write down and chart what their business aspirations are. It is a great plan to use if you're getting a loan or if you're just trying to convince investors to believe in you and you can have the financing and the funding to, support yourself. I would include that with the purchase if they just let me know that they heard you and I today on the show. My website is www.versiewalker.com. That's spelled V as in victory, ERSIEWALKER.com. I am available to speak at organizations, corporations, and other affiliates. You can actually contact me directly through the website. You can also follow me on Facebook as well, and that's, again, Versie Walker on Facebook.
Very good. Well, Versie, I really appreciate your time. Learned a lot, and I do encourage you, all the listeners, to go out and purchase his book and help yourself get to the next level. It's always about pushing yourself to the next level, and we all need that kick every now and then, and it's important to follow your dreams because just like you said, time is of essence, and we don't spend it correctly. So thanks again, Versie. I wish everyone a happy holiday, too, on the line. And, Versie, thanks so much for your time again.
Thank you. I hope you have me again, Mike. God bless.
Okay. God bless, too. Bye now.
Bye-bye.